Hello everyone, and welcome to the serve, the scoop. We are continuing on our way through the VBLS. This is week 3, and I am not joined alone, as some would say. I have with me the illustrious LS. Please, say hello to the audience.
Hello audience, it is I, LS.
And it is an absolute pleasure to have you on the channel again. Though I have learned from my mistakes of trying to put the winky face in the titles of videos, because putting emoji in titles of videos, or emoticons, or whichever one it is, does not work out very well for their performance. So, instead, I will just have to have your invigorating presence to propel us forward. And speaking of invigorating presences, our first game today is your game against... I actually have not asked them how this is pronounced. You go with Barnosa or Barnosa?
I reckon Nosa, but I have no clue.
Alright, let's go with... I mean, it's possible it's not Bar, but I'm going to go with Barnosa. And I may ask them, because I think I play them next week, I may ask them. So, definitely an interesting matchup, as the audience can see, and I'm pretty sure you can see.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so... in this matchup, I think one of the main things that you identified, and that I think a number of people in the audience may be able to identify, is that it is particularly difficult for you to attempt to set up Trick Room with Reuniclus here. It seems like a very volatile matchup. Does that seem accurate to you?
Yeah, there's a particular my team is slow, and there's a particular 2 Pokemon that they have that make setting up Trick Room quite difficult.
Those Pokemon would be Bishop and Golurk, I imagine?
Ooh, no.
They also have...
Tauros, and
they also have Anger Point Tauros. They also have, I think, a few good Raw options. I believe Striker has Raw, that may be incorrect. Cyclozar's got Raw. Meganium has Raw. Yes, it is Meganium. I have to, double check, because a bunch of people have been drafting, Bayleaf. I have to double check that it is Meganium when I see a Meganium. And I believe Braviary is Whirlwind, and I think Bishop may also have Raw. So certainly not the easiest one. Also, Imprison Trick Room, potentially. But they may also want to build their own Trick Room team, because there's Spiritomb has a good matchup into Reuniclus, and beyond that, it's very much back and forth about the different speed tiers within the team. You've got a few Pokemon that are slower than theirs, but then they've got Golurk, and it's something where they can very much run like a speed drop item on Golurk, and that's something you do want to keep in mind. That said,
for sure,
one thing that I think is annoying, and I don't believe we actually spoke on it, we had the opportunity to talk on it in prep, but most of the Oricorio forms are actually somewhat annoying for you to take hits from. You don't necessarily have the most flawless matchup into...
and I do have 2 4 times weak to flying ones, which makes it a bit scary.
Yeah, into flying types. So that's definitely something to keep in mind, and then they can use the different forms. None of them let them get neutral to rock, which is nice for Rhydon, but Rhydon, I think, does have his own problems in the matchup. But yeah, certainly Trick Room doesn't necessarily look like it's the easiest option for you this set,
No.
so you have to be a bit innovative on it. And then from your opponent's team, I definitely think that the Cryogonal Tauros option seems really strong, because it's faster than your entire team, with the exception of Scarfers. What's sorry?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was agreeing with you.
Yeah, though perhaps a bit volatile to opposing Fake Out. If you sort of bank... Yeah, there are different things. If you see a Tauros lead and it doesn't intimidate next to next to Cryogonal, you definitely expect that to be coming out there. You sort of assume that the Cryogonal is... one of the 2 is Terra Ghost, and the other one is Coat Cloak. And from there, it's okay, what are we worried about? Cyclozar is another very fast Pokemon, as well as Striker. Both of them can sort of throw a choice item on and be able to pressure a lot of damage into your slots. You don't necessarily have the greatest Dragon Resist on account of not having one, I believe. Is that correct? That's correct, right?
Yes.
I think I've got 1 Dragon Resist, so...
Steel types aren't real.
Do I even have a Dragon Resist? I'm just gonna peek ahead to my matchup. Yes, I have a single Dragon Resist. Skarmory, well known for its ability to take Dragon's coverage moves, such as Flamethrower, or in this case, Overheat. But yeah, the fast guys can be annoying. The other fast guys are annoying. And then like Golurk and Bishop are problems themselves, and Spiritomb can sort of try and threaten to switch it up on you. That said, I think sort of the threat, outside of the fact that these two are generally special, could be physical, but generally special, Tauros, then be physical. Outside of that, these three Pokemon sort of function to have the exact same threat bubble into your team, where you can sort of prep to deal with them in very similar ways. If you have the ability to get speed control, then you have the ability to break through them. And if you're not running speed for them, you do have the ability to run like quite a bulky set, and then that allows you to take their hits a bit better. Unfortunately, this does sort of make Rotom not seem great, because you do have an electric immunity here, and then a ghost immunity and electric resist here, as well as it's not necessarily loving the matchup into Bishop. It's not necessarily loving the matchup. No, does it have competitive? I know the other one is Defiant, but I think this has Tinted Lens, not competitive.
Tinted Lens.
Yeah.
And so it has the speed boosting move.
Yeah, and then you've got Golurk, who is very offensively strong, and is sometimes itself an assault-based user, but in general is often run quite tanky, especially if you're expecting it to come as something that could function within Trick Room, or as something with like a Scarf speed control. Then it's able to get the upper hand initially, because it does have that no-guard Poltergeist, which is always fun, and I sort of wish that I had, but I'll take Frisk in the meantime. But yeah, so a lot of options from your opponent, potentially like Drizzile screens, though I don't think you're super worried about that. And then from their side, what they want to do is bring a fast offense, whether it's just these two, like with a Specs and a Band or whatever, or like a Specs and a Life Orb. Then you have like the Cryodge, Tauros option, and then you probably do want something to stabilize you against Trick Room, so either you go full aggro against allowing you to set up Trick Room, you're using both Psychic types, so they could do Bishop and Golurk, or they bring their own Trick Room with then like a Spiritomb option. You do also think Oricorio could come, and you'd be somewhat worried about Braviary coming, because you don't have anything that resists both its stabs, and again, flying is quite good on top of the Oricorio. But I think you generally weren't super worried about Drizzile or Meganium, is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, Drizzile's my homie. I've used him before in VGC. He has screens, Icy Wind, like he's viable, but I wasn't super worried because my team was already slow enough, so why I'm going to click Icy Wind into it?
Yeah, it's really just the screens as like a check to Trick Room. That would be mildly annoying. So, we come to Team Preview here. We see that they have in fact done sort of what we're saying. They've got the Trick Room option with like Spiritomb Golurk. They've got that explosive Frost Breath Anger Point option with Tauros and Coroginal. They've got the Fast Cycles are there, and it's able to either do damage itself or to be damage mitigation with Breaking Swipe and the like, which definitely can be annoying if you are in Trick Room. Sorry, the thing I missed talking about on your side is that if you do have speed control, your team is very good. Beartic absolutely shreds most of this team because they have 2 ice resists and they're both weak to fighting. They also have Drizzile. I apologize.
Drizzile isn't a real resist.
I mean, with the Eviolite, and a Reflect Up, it definitely can be, but not necessarily the most immediately threatening Pokemon. On top of that, the dual stab of a scrappy Decidueye, very threatening into this team. It's really just the Oricorios, and it depends what Oricorio they are. And then you do have, to some extent, Bostiff is okay, Heracross is definitely good at threatening, Rhydon's definitely good at threatening. So, if you can get speed control, you're in a really good position. So, you see this team preview. Now, if I'm your opponent, I think I see no Trick Room setters. I'm probably thinking
Grumpig is a Trick Room setter.
You're completely correct, I apologize. I see no Reuniclus, specifically. No, like the main Trick Room abuser, right? I think that you're probably trying to do maybe like a Tailwind option with Decidueye, maybe like potential Icy Wind option with Fake Out from Wartortle. Potentially, you brought Scarf Heracross previously. If I've watched your previous games, maybe thinking, oh, maybe it's another Scarf Heracross with that Rain Dance to enable Beartic to pop off. Potentially Grumpig could also be Scarf with Rain Dance. I suspect it gets it.
It gets a lot of proofs.
And Grumpig can also Icy Wind. So that's what I'm sort of thinking here. So then the main thing that they want to do is lead a lot of offensive pressure, and they'd like to be able to pressure both of your slots. When you were here, what were you thinking your opponent was leading?
Diagonal and Tauros.
Okay. Considering other comments that you've made subsequent to this, previous to this, wow, that seems like an odd decision that you made in that expectation. Okay, so
It's the most like telegraphed lead. Like obviously you have a bunch of other stuff you could do, but it's the one that screams those two Pokemon are coming. It's like when you see Urshifu and Tornadus, you're like, oh, those two guys are coming together.
I think that perhaps those Pokemon are easier to detach from one another than a Cryogonal is for an Anger Point Tauros.
Yeah, I was potentially worried about Oricorio clicking Tailwind, but I was expecting Cryo Tauros lead.
Okay, so we come here turn 1. You have decided to lead the Wartortle and Decidueye. Look, if you see your opponent here, you 100% are expecting them to go for Frost Breath and then an attacking move, or potentially, if they don't have Terra Ghost or whatever, they may do something to play around Protect. They may like click Protect to play around Fake Out, right? That said, they do have to keep in mind that you may click Tailwind with Decidueye, and they do have to keep in mind that obviously Wartortle itself has a range of support moves that can be quite threatening. So they probably want to try and pressure, ideally both of your slots, right? It wouldn't be entirely shocking to see the Tauros go for a Protect here if it's not Covert Cloak and click Icy Wind, or if it is Terra Ghost, to potentially go for Terra Ghost and Frost Breath if the Cryogonal is the one that's...
Did you want me to explain my lead and my reasoning for it?
Yeah, so I'm just like trying to talk about what But then I want to say what they're expecting from you, right? So they see this Wartortle Decidueye lead. I think they're mostly just expecting you to go for a type of speed control. Now, do you want to explain why you led this pair?
Okay, so my set on my Wartortle is not a traditional supportive, like, Fake Out Icy Wind kind of guy. I kind of wanted to lead it as a bluff to kind of say, like, oh, I'm clicking Fake Out and I'm clicking Tailwind this turn. That's definitely what I'm going to happen. Haha. But in reality, that's not
something
what
far
I was
more
going
sinister.
for. Something far more sinister. And I thought in my head that if this lead somewhat worked into this lead, and I wanted to scout potentially a Terra Ghost as well on the Cryogonal game 1. I had other leads as well that could have worked, but I wanted to see if I could scout some stuff a little bit game 1. So I wanted to lead my two guys to do some funny combos. And
you had something. You had another plan for getting speed control.
I had two plans for getting speed control, and based on what their lead was, because I was expecting this lead, but I did have another trick up my sleeve in case they did do something a bit different. Which I don't want to spoil it.
You may have used in game 2, but yeah. So you led this option because this does actually present your speed control option, right? So yes. You see the Frost Breath Anchor Point go off. Now, what you are very happy to see here is the Earthquake come out. So you are actually Sash on the Wartortle. That's good for you if you were EVO light and you're especially defensive oriented. Entirely possible that you fainted there. Now you actually see that take a very small amount from the Frost Breath. So my assumption here, which may or may not have been yours, is like I immediately looked at that. I think this Cryogonal's probably quite bulky because it barely did any damage to Frost Breath, and that's probably an Assault Vest on the Tauros. The follow-up thing is, okay, that did a lot to the Decidueye for a resisted Earthquake, like spread move, non-stab, whatever. That means that this Tauros is... Sorry, that it's attack invested. Maybe full attack invested, maybe like just a partially attack invested, possibly adamant, though I calculated it did less than it would have if it was adamant max attack, so it depends sort of where that investment is. And you wouldn't be shocked if it was faster than Rodent. Now this Cryogonal, neither of these Pokemon went for Terra Ghost. Does that lead you to come to any specific conclusion about Cryogonal?
Mr. Cryogonal is holding a cloak. He's too cold. He needs to stay warm.
Yeah, so we've sort of inferred the Assault Vest. Now, the reason that I imagine they feel comfortable not going for Terra Ghost if they have it on Tauros, because it doesn't really matter if the Tauros gets faked out. Obviously, you miss a turn of damage, but you still get the Anger Point set up, which means you can still attack next turn, right? So they're thinking, you don't necessarily have a sufficient amount to threaten the Tauros to prevent it from being able to, do work on this turn, right? Neither of these Pokemon are necessarily immediately threatening to Tauros, especially since it does have that Assault Vest. So they are going to, sort of ignore your speed control and be able to get KOs into both slots. So that's where I think the Earthquake is coming out of. They were maybe hoping it would do more to the Decidueye, didn't necessarily know how bulky invested it was. Maybe feeling that out, hoping it wasn't Citrus, certainly. Maybe hoping even that it was potentially Life Orb and was then going to be taking some recoil. Stranger things have happened, certainly. But no, the Water Pledge comes out here, and you follow that up with the Grass Pledge.
Oh yeah, baby.
Setting up Swamp.
Swamp. And I'm sure everyone knows what that does off the top of their head, right?
Every single person. I totally didn't think it was the one that made secondary effects have Seringrace.
No. I basically, and what it does is it quarters your opponent's speed for 4 turns. Sorry, 3 turns.
Yeah, 4 turns because it includes the one that's on, but that's not that helpful. It's actually really bad if they click jarrable.
Yeah, I said, what's the best form of speed control I can come up with this game because my team's so slow? And I decided if I double pledge and then have some heavy hitters in the back, then that's probably going to work out well for me.
Yeah, so this enables even potentially mons of yours that are invested for Trick Room, if you bring it, to still outspeed some of their faster Pokemon like the Tauros, like the Cyclizar, like the Corroginal. On the plus side, you're sitting in front of the Corroginal with the offensive Decidueye. That 38% really speaks to just how dumb pledges are, because that is an Assault Vest, probably somewhat bulky Tauros. We didn't actually get a pace from the opponent for this one, so I did mock one up based on what information we saw in the games. But yeah.
So it doubles the power of whichever pledge goes second.
Yeah.
So it's basically a 160 base
power stab move. Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't have the best special attack, but that's still a freaking strong grass move.
Yeah, it still has pretty good special attack, right? I think 96 or some number? 95? I don't know. I don't have the Decidueye stats in front of me. It's kind of like it still has good special attack for some reason. Well, I know what the reason is. The reason is that the other one has good special attack, so they just give them both good special attack. But it's not like a good reason. It's just a reason. I can check. It has 95 special attack. I was right.
Well, you said 96. You weren't actually.
Yeah, I said 96, 95. I don't know. Shush. Yeah. So. Yeah, and I mean that only doing 38. I think very much confirms that this is Assault Vest. Probably confirms it's certainly not max def. That damage from Earthquake was so much. But you have the speed advantage in a way that is slightly more difficult for your opponent to overcome than Tailwind, because they can't just sort of like Icy Wind once or whatever. And you are threatening a KO into at least the Corroginal, if not also the Tauros. Now, in this turn, like this turn 2 that we've just hit, so do you have any thoughts about what your opponent has in the back this game?
In all honesty, no. I didn't like it. There wasn't a super clear what was in the back, if that makes sense. Like
I would suggest, I think it's very clear Spiritomb is not in the back.
Yeah, that's probably the only guy I would say that isn't in the back. But like the rest of them,
yeah, I think Cyclizar is maybe not in the back, but it definitely could be. I think it's very likely that Oricloria was in the back. And then it's Cyclizar and Golurk. I would just expect it to be Golurk, because Golurk is better. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, it's more or less. I expected Oricorio and then probably not Spiritomb and then one of the others.
Yeah.
Based on their lead.
Now, you know what 2 you have in the back. In your case, as your opponent, I'm probably thinking it's not Rhydon. No, it could be Rhydon. It's definitely, I don't think it's Grumpig, because obviously you've gone Swamp, right? I think Beartick is very likely. Team is fairly weak to ice. Certainly the 6 they brought were fairly weak to ice. Like they didn't even bring Bishop. Not to say they should have brought Bishop, right? Obviously you have several fighting types and a Rhydon. And Beartick, we explained, has CC, right? But yeah, but because they don't have Bishop, they definitely expect Bearticks to come. And then it's one of Rhydon or Heracross. There are probably some Pokemon that Rhydon is still slower than, even if they do have Swamp, especially if the Rhydon is Trick Room invested, which they could be, because as you mentioned, Grumpig. But you'd expect it generally to be one of Heracross or Rhydon. So their thoughts need to be on how do they pressure out these two options, right? They kind of think they've got the Assault Vest here, right? So they aren't able to protect. So that means they don't want to waste time trying to stall out Swamp. They want to be pushing damage into both of your slots. And the thing that they can do the best is force you to double the Tauros, because they would expect it to be able to live at the very least the War Turtle, if not one hit directly from like a triple arrows from Decidueye or a Leaf Blade. So what they want to do is make sure that you have pressure to hit both their Pokemon. They want to try and get rid of both of your Pokemon. So I imagine they're going for an attack move with both slots. Probably an Ice move into Decidueye, and most likely another Earthquake. Is that what you sort of were expecting your opponent to do? They could double switch. If they had Spiritomb,
I mean,
that would be maybe a good turn. Not really, right? Because you got Scrappy.
Yeah. More or less where my head's at here is I want to get as much damage and get these guys off the field quick to get my guys in the back in.
Yeah. Both of you are just sort of focused on, like, they're trying, like, this is a matchup of pressure to pressure, right? It's a very volatile situation. You've only got the 3 more turns of Swamp, but they've got the Tauros here, which doesn't have the ability to get Anchor Points again, so they want to get the best use of Anchor Point they can. And by making you, by pressuring you at both slots, that's how they're doing that. Did you ever consider Terastallizing this turn?
Not overly. Okay. I kind of just wanted these guys to die.
Yeah.
The Terrors I had as well weren't. I had Terra Electric on my Decidueye, and I thought that's a waste.
Yeah, not going to be great into Earthquake.
It was a more of a defensive Terror, and
yeah. So we see, even with the Torrent boost, the Assault Vest Tauros does take it. Yeah, look, Corrosional, especially a bulky Corrosional that has such little special attack, not going to be taking a lot from Water Pledge. But, so you went for prioritizing some damage into Tauros and removing the Corrosional. Obviously, they could protect the Corrosional. You expect that they can't protect Tauros. Going for the triple arrows there. Like you said, you don't think it's Sash, you think it's Covert Cloak. You just want to get rid of their Pokemon. They also want to get rid of yours. So we do see...
I'm now assuming at this point they're no longer protect, because if they were, they would have clicked it to try and stall a turn.
It depends. They don't want you to double target their Tauros and then get rewarded, right?
Yeah.
I would sack the Corrosional there if it meant that, like, if you double target Tauros, which you may want to do, right? Like, either Tauros gets a turn off, or they get to kill Corrosional, Decidueye with Corrosional. Potentially, they kill the War Turtle and go for an Icy Wind. But, like, they managed to get a kill. Both of these Pokemon have the ability to get a kill, as well as deal damage to the other slot, or just get a kill on the Decidueye. So I think that they're probably not valuing the Corrosional. The Protect there to maybe stall a turn is not better than trying to remove one of your major pieces that is threatening Tauros.
Yeah, I guess.
So I think that's a pretty reasonable play. But obviously it's a difficult situation. Swamp isn't something you deal with. They really dislike seeing this. They really dislike seeing that I like how it says it used Water Pledge, even though it used Grass Pledge. But they really dislike seeing the Citrus Berry come up. Now, they bring out Oricorio, and then you unfortunately bring out the worst thing for the Oricorio to see, which is Beartick. So, what was your thought process on... you mentioned you have Heracross in the back. Beartick versus Heracross.
Heracross... Not Heracross. Wow, that's a good Pokemon. I should have brought that one.
Yeah.
Beartick, I thought exerted a lot of pressure on pretty much all of their available Mons. Whereas if I, on the odd chance...
Yeah, Heracross
not odd chance.
wasn't good in Oricorio, wasn't good in Spiritomb.
Or, like, if they bring in... Beartick just felt better and able to exert more pressure, pretty much, more or less.
Yeah, so you're bringing out Beartick because even though it... if they have, like, some weird move or whatever, maybe like a weird Terror on Golurk, they could potentially use that to stall out a turn on their end and get some advantage. But you are able to threaten any Pokemon that comes in. Spiritomb is the worst matchup, but even then, much more reliably than you can by bringing Heracross in, because the main Pokemon that Heracross is good into are already in, as well as Decidueye is always going to be threatening Tauros, it's always going to threaten Spiritomb, and it's always going to threaten Golurk, and it's always going to threaten Cyclizar. So then you just want something to bring in that can threaten Oricorio. And, like, it doesn't matter which of these Pokemon targets Tauros, because it's a -4 speed and it's so low. So if they're bringing something Decidueye focuses, then it doesn't matter. So it's only about bringing something that Decidueye can't focus.
The other reason I targeted the Cryogonal in the previous time, I forgot to mention, was I didn't know if some of my guys was outspeed all of their team if they clicked Icy Wind once. Like,
absolutely.
These guys did not have like any speed investment really, so one Icy Wind could have really screwed me over.
Yeah, no, like I said, the Icy Wind coming out from them was very possible, or just a Frost Breath into the Decidueye. Because Icy Wind would have picked up War Turtle and it would have made it so that maybe some of their faster Pokemon like Cyclizar, obviously they didn't have Cyclizar on the back, potentially Tauros, potentially even Oricorio, maybe faster. That's why I think that their Croagional play made sense. And like it allowed them to remove your Beartic, to remove your War Turtle and to get damage into Decidueye. But yeah, I mean, part of this is why it can be challenging to use these Assault Vest sets. It helps to take less damage from Frost Breath, but it means that you're a lot more subject to your opponent responding to such a volatile game plan, right? That's why the game plans are volatile. They reduce the amount of agency that you have. If the Tauros had Protect, I'm not saying that this is bad prep, to be clear. I'm just saying that this is like a trade-off that you're making, right? To ensure that you're taking less shit. The trade-off that you're making is that you're then risking your own Pokemon significantly more to your opponent's decision-making because you don't have access to Protect. And you don't want to switch because it has Anger Point Boost, right? So yeah. This turn, Triple Arrows comes out. Icicle Spear comes out. 3 hits comes down. I actually really like the nickname theme. The tarot cards. I am like a bit of a Blancher addict, and generally I think the tarot cards seem kind of cool. So we do see the tower come in. Now, you go for the Protect here. We spoke about this specifically.
Yeah.
That's just to preserve, potentially preserve differential. You can say that they might go for a move here. Obviously, you don't know that they're Terra fighting. Certainly, if they don't Terra into something, then whatever. You also mentioned you'd forgotten that you still had one more turn of Swamp.
Yeah, I don't know how to read the English language sometimes. Yeah. Happens to the best of us.
I think if you had gone Triple Arrows and Icicle Spear, maybe Citrus Berry would be the most annoying thing with like Terra Bug. Maybe Terra Fire, but I think it may have to have been Terra Bug. Certainly any Citrus Berry set into a Terra that's neutral, let alone resists Ice, could potentially lose you a Pokemon. But it's fine. It comes out. Heracross is able to get the KO on that last turn of Swamp. Theoretically, that Golurk may have been faster than Decidueye on that last turn. But yeah, very, very well played. You kept with the tempo. You made good decisions, and because your opponent obviously had an expected Swamp, it can be a very difficult thing to try and goal, especially when bringing your own volatile game plan. You managed to leverage that advantage very effectively. And by pressuring both slots, you were ensuring that you were consistently making progress. I think there are situations where I might have tried to double that Tauros, and that would have meant that you were potentially losing the advantage of your speed control to an Icy Wind. So it was definitely really well played game from your end, and they did what they could. They played towards what outs they did have. I definitely think that they played that game well. But it's very difficult after that first turn Swamp. I have not played against Pledges since 2021. I actually went back and checked. Unfortunately, the replay is gone, but I remembered a game where I had to play against Pledges, and they went for the Sea of Fire. No, it's called the Grass Fire. The Grass and Fire Pledge one. That's called like a Swamp of it's something to do with fire.
There's one that's also a Rainbow from memory.
Rainbow is the one that's Serene Grace. There's Swamp that is the -4 speed, and then there's Sea of Fire, which is just Gigantamax Volcanion. Or no, not Volcanion. What's it called? Volcalith?
Volcalith, the Brock one.
Yeah. I mean, it's all of them, right? It's Wildfire, it's... What's it called? Vine Lash? And Barrage? Was it Barrage? That doesn't sound right.
You're making my memory think too hard here.
Yeah. But it does damage to both of you, both of your Pokemon that are on the field for a number of turns. It's cool. Yeah, so certainly, you had a very good game plan and you executed on it. You used the tempo, right? The only, maybe dodgy play was that one Protect. And look, if they had Citrus Berry, they probably still lived, even if that Terra didn't resist Triple Arrows. So definitely did not wind up being something that was super likely to jeopardize you because you had that game in the back.
And the one cool thing is I didn't reveal any terrors.
I have never heard of this mechanic, Terastallization. And they did reveal a Terra. I don't know if that Terra mattered for Dynamic Punch damage, but I wouldn't be shocked. It's obviously not a stab move. And they did reveal that they were likely no guard because they clicked Dynamic Punch, which is a 50% accurate move.
I mean,
either that or they just screwed the game.
No guard.
I actually often assume Iron Fist, but when I ran it, I just mostly used Iron Fist because I would have like a single punch move and no inaccurate moves because I hate them. Except for Poltergeist, that's not an inaccurate move, right?
I've never missed one.
I totally haven't missed any this season. I don't think who knows? Sorry. Who knows? Maybe I missed one this week. And then we come to your second game. So I think that you are like, okay, if they play that game slightly differently, obviously they saw the situation, they know who the Sash is on now, right? If they do the same lead, they can just Raging Bull the Decidueye, and then you don't get speed control. Now, you didn't reveal Terra. Obviously, they may have to worry about Terra Ghost or whatever. If they have, like, Iron Head, maybe that should be able to do the same thing, because we saw so much damage from that resisted Earthquake. So, their thought process is, okay, I probably want to switch up to a different game plan. One that plays really well into Swamp is the Trick Room mode, so the Trick Room mode is definitely an option. Alternatively, an Oricorio Tailwind can allow them, with those high base speed Pokemon, and the fact that they can see your Pokemon are quite bulky from the damage they were taking, they want to think about, maybe I can get past your thing with an Oricorio Tailwind. But certainly they want to move towards one of their speed control dominated game plans, because that matches up reasonably well into yours, because they ran frailer Pokemon, but those frailer Pokemon are faster, and with any speed control may be able to overcome yours. Also, the Golurk wasn't that frail, as we saw.
Yeah, it's a strong boy.
So, what are your thoughts on how you're adapting your game plan?
So, I kind of agreed that they're going to make up some level of a change, whether that's the same lead but like different targeting options or whatever, or if they might commit to a hard Trick Room mode, seeing that like my team outsped theirs or whatever, like they don't know all my speed investments and whatnot. I was kind of expecting Oricorio Tailwind mode, because I think if they click Tailwind, then they still probably outpace most of my team.
Yeah, and Oricorio is faster than all the Pokemon that you have in your draft. So
yes, I expected
when
a
you're
change,
like,
but I still had a trick.
I'm worried about Oricorio, or potentially worried about Trick Room. What is, like, how do you adapt that? And your answer is Trick Room yourself, yeah?
No.
No? Okay, then, sorry. Actually, I have seen this game. I watched this game recently. I don't even remember. I remember a number of, like, specific turns. I don't even remember what lead is.
My lead here is my Heracross, which, as we kind of said in prep, what if you bring a Scarf? It is a Scarf Heracross, plus my Wartortle, because they still don't know. They know one move on it. They know Water Pledge. Like, you know, I'm still kind of, again, this set doesn't have Fake Out, but I'm kind of bluffing a Fake Out here.
Yeah.
Which is good because it allows me to get off to shenanigans.
Yeah, so the Scarf Heracross enables you to pressure the Oricorio at lead, as well as any partner Pokemon. Certainly it will allow you to get through that Corroginal from what we saw, and then you are able to bluff Fake Out. So, we see their lead. Very interesting lead. Cyclizar. We know Cyclizar, I think, often a Cloakmon, is not Cloak in this matchup. And then we see Spiritomb, which to me, we don't see Pressure, which is normal. We see Infiltrator. Makes some sense if they're worried about you bringing screens. You did have Grumpig, right? So it's definitely possible that you have screens, especially since you eschewed Reuniclus. But I think that they definitely consider Trick Room to be a pretty likely candidate from you at this point. But if you got the Scarf Heracross, I think you're pretty happy about seeing the Cyclizar lead.
Yes, I was frothing at the mouth like a happy little boy.
I'm very glad to hear that.
What does that sentence even mean? Why do I say these things sometimes now?
No one knows.
I don't know. Yeah, so I saw this and kind of the first thought is, okay, they're going to click Trick Room and Shed Tail. I mean, it's not the telegraph lead. There's a lot of things they could have gone through, but that at least was in my mind. So, I mean, the obvious thing was, I'm going to CC this Cyclizar.
And you're going to click your other speed control move, right?
I'm going to click my other secret speed control move, because I didn't, like, they could have gone for quite, like, Spiritomb is one of those guys who has, like, a lot of support moves they could have clicked here. Like, it doesn't have to be Trick Room, even though it is quite likely. Yeah,
Calm Mind is a very potential option. Like, Heracross is having to click, like, a bug move into it. And look, Guts Megahorn is definitely good here. but you don't have guts yet, right? So there's definitely options they have, and then her Spiritomb also has the option to potentially neuter physical attackers of yours with Wisp, and special attackers of yours with Snarl. Generally less good into Heracross because, again, it does have guts. But yeah, definitely something they have to think about. Yeah, Shedtail Trick Room is possible, but honestly, Shedtail Snarl is possible, and Shedtail, yeah, probably not Wisp, but and maybe like a foul play.
There's even a world where Cyclozar was like clicking defensive terror and shift gearing or something. Like that was also on my mind. Or Specs Draco.
Look, if it's me, I don't have Cyclozar. I brought Cyclozar to a singles game recently. Bro was choice banded. I hit Outrage into an Iron Trance, man. It did 30%. It was great. No, it didn't do 30%. They were like Fist F. I think it did like 28.
I brought it to a singles game too today. So cute.
It was a Cyclozar, did you say?
Yeah, I brought a Cyclozar to a low tier league, so it was just holding Assault Vest, eating every hit.
Oh no, I was clicking banded. It's part of my regen core with Hoa. But yeah, you know. So yes. Definitely a thing where they could be very scared of you potentially going for like Fake Out, potentially even sub with Heracross. So they may want to try and throw like a Shadow Ball into Heracross's way, or like set Trick Room obviously, and then do that the next turn. But obviously they don't know that you have Shell Smash, and they don't know that the Heracross is Scarf. So we actually see that they have good prep for the Scarf Heracross, kind of. Well, definitely not. Like obviously it would have died, right? So Tropical Barrier is good, means it doesn't die. Unfortunately, its Shed Tail then failed. So, some prep for the Scarf Heracross, but unfortunately not enough to make it through the Scarf Heracross blow and get that there. And then you, unfortunately, have your own setup turn with Shell Smash.
Yeah. Yay.
So, at this point, what do you expect they have in the back?
Golurk plus...
Not Cryogonal, right?
Cryogonal. Yeah, not Cryogonal, but the other two either or.
Yeah.
Like it could be.
I'd probably be leaning mildly towards Oricorio, just because the Assault Vest Taurus, even with attack investment, isn't going to be doing crazy damage without without Anger Point, but it's still going to be doing some damage, so it definitely could come.
Yeah.
So we see the Trick Room come up. You immediately make a switch into Bear Tick. Do you want to explain why? I didn't manage to pause in time. Sorry.
Okay, so once they click Trick Room, I now have a -1 Heracross, who I can identify once Trick Room is over will, you know, contribute well. So I decided to preserve him and bring in my Beartic, who had like no speed investment, only enough speed to outspeed everything at -4 basically in the swamp. So I thought it's probably going to eat a hit here, but it's bulky. It's not super bulky, but it'll live the hit, and it'll be able to put out damage.
Both of their Pokemon are going to move before Heracross does, and you recognize that Heracross is reasonable into any of the Pokemon in the back. If the Golurk Terras, there's nothing that the Heracross is bad into, because it'll have moves to hit Oricorio or Tauros, and generally those moves will also be able to hit the Terra-fighting Golurk. But yeah, you don't want to take damage on it, so you're valuing it, and you recognize that Beartic is likely to make it in and not really worry that much about the turn.
The other reason I did that as well is because I now have a +2 Wartortle that they know is Sash, so there's also a good chance that they double into that slot. So I click Protect with that, which then potentially lets Beartic come in for free without even having to take a hit.
Absolutely. So they Wisp into the Heracross, which I found mildly confusing, but maybe they were calling a switch.
I mean, if you see Scarf, you do think Moxie. Like that's at least what I would assume.
Yeah. I mean, look, I know I'm a defensive ass player, so I would definitely run Guts on Scarf, but yeah, definitely makes sense if they're playing around Moxie. Very good to limit the damage of a Pokemon that is as threatening as we were discussing, as well as being able to punish switches. You know, Rhydon could have come in there. I think Rhydon's probably your next most likely candidate to come in, but Decidueye also theoretically could have, and you know, it's not like it's bad into Grumpig if it does come in. It certainly was very good into Beartic. Beartic we saw was quite offensively threatening to them, and now it'll still be offensively threatening, but much slower. Now, they do go for the attack into the Wartortle just to break Sash there. I'm not sure what the Cyclozar is, but this would make me think it's probably not Breaking Swipe, because I think if it was Breaking Swipe, you break the sash anyways by clicking breaking swipe, so the knockoff isn't going to be super relevant.
On to pretty much anything but a Grumpy.
Yeah. So, you see the Nightshade come out. I think you're pretty happy about that. Obviously, it's doing 25 with burn, that's going to get through there, but I think a lot of potentially more invested moves. Like, Nightshade's really simple, but into a lot of Pokemon with moderate health, it is unfortunately a bit flawed. Like, it's not going to be able to break through the 95 base HP of Beartic super easily. If you do have Rhydon on the back, you feel very confident about its matchup into Rhydon. If you, like, even with this Wartortle here, I imagine you feel like, pretty confident it's not going to go down to a double up from the Spiritomb and Cyclozar. And Cyclozar's not going to get the chance. Oh, sorry, last game, I meant to say, when they saw the Icicle Spear do a bunch of hits, do the 5 hits into Golurk, they should infer it's loaded dice. They don't know that this Heracross is Scarf, but they've gotten information on your other 3 items that game. So they are pretty confident, unfortunately, that this Beartic is going to be doing a significant amount of damage even through that burn. But they're pretty confident as well that the Spiritomb is unlikely to take too much. So Water Pledge goes in there, it does 55, obviously it's Shell Smashed up. They know it's Sash, but they know for sure now that it's invested with special attack. And you know that this is a physically defensive Spiritomb because it just took 55 instead of like 30 from Wartortle.
Yes.
Now
does not have the strongest stats.
At this point, you Golurk is slower or faster? Golurk is faster than Beartic. So you think that either they bring in Golurk and a min speed, it's going to be slower than your Beartic, right? But they may not know how invested your Beartic is. Like you said, you did prioritize getting rid of the Corrosional, so you may have thought that, oh, Icy Wind or whatever. And then Golurk is in fact the Pokemon that comes in. You see a room service activate, so that's how they know they could be confident into Beartic that it wasn't going to be like an issue in that sense. But something you can feel very confident about here. You know the Spiritomb is Nightshade, and you see that this Golurk, you know, the best it could click is Earthquake, which isn't going to knock out. Maybe with a double up of Nightshade it will knock out, but they're very unlikely to be able to KO both of your Pokemon. So you know that either you can protect the Wartortle here to stall out for later into the game, or you can, or even the Beartic, right? Or you can just sort of let hits go because they're unlikely to KO both of your Pokemon this turn. Actually,
I choose the manliest option. I see 2 turns left, and I see I probably win outside of Trick Room, and I hit double protect to stall a turn of Trick Room.
And they go for the Dynamic Punch Confusion over like Poltergeist.
Yeah.
And then you can hit a second protect.
Do you want me to explain the thought process here?
No, it's obvious. There are... I mean, like, I think you could attack with both slots, right? But you still then double target the Wartortle next turn. If you expect it to faint anyway, you may as well go for the double protect, right?
Yeah, and
if it's out of Trick Room, it's very threatening.
And now that the Golurk's terrored as well, I'm a lot more confident in a Heracross clicking CCs.
Like we mentioned earlier, so the Heracross thing...
It's worth the risk.
If it's Taurus or Corrosional in the back, like I said, we don't expect Corrosional, but if it is Taurus in the back, there's only Spiritomb left. Oricorio, if it is Oricorio in the back, there's still different options that you can click. You don't have to lock into CC. But yeah, a double going into that slot as well feels very, very good for you when you got that double protect. Honestly, I think it feels fine for you even if you don't. Because like we're seeing, this Beartic is still doing damage that matters, right? But now you are able to dictate the flow of the coming turn, and you just prevent Trick Room. Yeah. Because it doesn't matter. If Golurk clicks Earthquake, maybe Beartic faints, maybe it doesn't. Maybe with Burn. I think pretty reasonably likely with Burn, but even if it doesn't, well, like whether it does or not, Wartortle won't because it's got its hash still. So, you know, you sort of have impunity to go here. If Oricorio comes in, it's not as tanky as the other guys. You saw that firsthand in the last game. This Shell Smash on turn 1, you know, because you did get that full power, wound up being, sorry, not full power, double protect, wound up being very effective. But even if you didn't, you know, you were just bringing a different Pokemon in here. I don't actually know that we see what was in the back here. But you have like a very significant mod advantage at this point. You remove that, and then oh no, they take out, like, that oh no sounds more sarcastic, but at this point you have such a significant mon advantage. You've got the Scarfair across, and you've got that Shell Smash Wartortle, as well as a whole extra Pokemon in the back that it's unlikely that this Assault Vest Taurus is going to be able to KO. I'm not sure that there's a line that your opponent has from here.
No, that's kind of...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So...
And then I wanted to... I didn't want to win the game without terroring any mon, because I felt like that was boring, so I just terrored for a little bit of extra damage for no real reason.
Incredible. I love the stab terror. I mean, imagine if you'd been Terra Ghost and had been able to Terra Ghost through that Dynamic Punch earlier. That would have been heartbreaking. So you managed to take the game in 2. Here's your place. I did make a mock of what we saw from the opponent. So we saw this Assault Vest and Max Attack invested. We saw that this was very low, potentially 0 attack IVs on the Cordial, but also most likely speed invested because it was faster than the Taurus, and like we said, we imagine the Taurus is faster than Rotom. I didn't count the Cyclozar, probably could have. And then we know that the Spiritomb is at least physically defense focused, because it took a very significant amount from the Water Pledge. But yeah, sure. Leftovers one actually being relatively effective. It meant that you had to put an extra attack into it, but a Citrus Berry I think would have been a bit more stable. We saw that Oricorio did not have Citrus Berry. I'd be interested in knowing what that is, but unfortunately. And we only saw these two... No, we only saw the one Terra, right? Goal at both games?
Yeah, fighting Terra both games.
Yeah, because your Beartic, you were able to position the Beartic effectively. Even burned, it was just such a problem for your opponent to deal with. Like,
yeah, it's got a good attack stat, Adamant 252 type beat.
Yeah, I mean, this is like sort of the fundamental problem with Burn, right? Is if a Pokemon is that threatening, the fact that it has to do two attacks or 3 attacks or whatever to get through a Pokemon instead of 1 less is sometimes not going to be enough to enable you to like win a game against it. Whereas doing damage well. That's why I like big numbers that do damage. Nightshade is like another one as well, which is good if it's a longer game, but you need more to facilitate it being a longer game. The issue with this Taurus set, maybe, sorry, I don't want this to come across as anything bad, but maybe like a challenge that they had is that this Taurus set, while it's Assault Vest, is very offensively invested, but it's still like obviously just an invested Taurus, right? No, not a boosted one if it doesn't have the anchor point up. They weren't like only really this Taurus was synergizing with the 11th strength that they had here. So this Golurk, bulky for sure, definitely quite tanky, and it does have Dynamic Punch, right? So Dynamic Punch and Wisp can maybe do some shenanigans together. But often if you're doing like a terrifying Dynamic Punch, you want that to be able to push damage, to be able to push Pokemon out of games. And Nightshade isn't necessarily doing a significant enough amount of damage to put Pokemon in range of that neutral Dynamic Punch. I think we only saw Dynamic Punch connect with Beartic, right? I believe it connected with Beartic in both games.
Maybe, I can't remember exactly.
No, it didn't connect with Beartic in this game. But it connected with Protect twice in this game, and it connected with Beartic last game. Gosh, 8 power points. Truly, Pokemon hates this guy. But yeah, so you had Encore Trick Room, quite a defensive guy. The Dazzling Gleam would help into the Spiritomb. Obviously, if the Spiritomb's lost was Snarl, that could have been impactful. Certainly, Nightshade would be doing more damage than Snarl was in those turns, but Snarl does have utility. It could have been Protect last, I'm not sure. Could be an Imprison as well. And then, yeah, you did have Tailwind. Honestly, probably could have gone for it, but maybe not fast enough. And certainly the Shell Smash wound up being very effective.
It was Tailwind was there as an option of speed control if I didn't want to commit to the double pledge type stuff. Yeah.
An issue that you were able to exploit was the fact that they're two... well, they've got 3 water resists, Drizzile, which you mentioned you had previous like qualms with, but then Cyclozar and Meganium, and you had Ice Beam for both of those Pokemon, which meant that with the Shell Smash boost, you were able to do pretty good neutral damage across the board on a Pokemon that was difficult to remove because of its Sash. Like, again, even if it had fainted in that double up, you're still in a very strong position because they wind up having to use 4 attacks to commit to that 1 war total.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty strong advantage. But certainly, close a game without that, but I think one that, given that the position that you were in, you were probably still reasonably likely to close out. I think just the burn into Bear Tick just wound up not being able to stymie your progress enough.
Yeah, he's a strong boy, that Bear Tick that my wife drafted that I clowned on massively and is now carrying my draft.
You can't hate an Ice type in low tier. That's what I'm realizing.
Yeah, steel, because there's no steel types, ice types, just, your Weavile as well.
And Keith's Weavile as well.
Keith's Weavile as well.
So yeah, definitely like an interesting thing, but it shows the difficulty of trying to build in this matchup, which is so oriented for speed control. We saw this sort of anti-speed control option with the Taurus Crudgel, which was definitely cool, but was made to struggle not having close combat. Obviously, gives disadvantages compared to Raging Bull, but certainly the I'm just having a stroke in the middle of trying to talk, and it's not working out great.
Happens to the best of us.
Yeah, it meant that this strategy didn't necessarily vibe with the strategy Spiritomb was going, but then that meant that you were using 2 fast Pokemon, the Oricorio and the Cyclizar or the Tauros or whatever, in the Trick Room mode. So you got the Shed Tail option there, which obviously definitely not a bad option, and then you've got the Oricorio, but you got the Oricorio and the Tauros. You don't necessarily gel with the Trick Room mode, so you are relying on starting Trick Room yourself, but then also you need the Trick Room to end so that your other Pokemon can come in. And that is very difficult in this low tier format, especially where there are less Pokemon that are as good at adapting to both modes. You wind up playing very defensively throughout their entire Trick Room. It wound up being a very different second game compared to the first game, which was very offensive focused, and then this one was very focused around defensive and passive play. But your team's offensive focus combined with Protect meant that you were able to match the defensive focus, especially with your bulk investment on Pokemon.
Oh, show.
So, now we come to the next game, which is my game. I was playing against BB Rafe, with a team of fully evolved Pokemon. That's fair. I sometimes do. I apologize for my laziness. So, yeah. A bunch of Pokemon, fully evolved Pokemon such as Duraludon, Sneasel, Ursaring, Starter Pikachu, Scyther, Basculin, and then like a couple other guys, like that guy from the anime. I don't really... Maybe this is an anime-based team. I haven't seen like what if there are Hisui Pokemon in the anime.
It's the Spot the Eviolite team.
Something like that. And luckily I have Frisk.
That's literally cheating into this team.
Sure. I think I predicted at Team Preview what their Eviolite Pokemon was, but that's fine. Yeah. Brain.
Your matchup.
What do you think about the matchup?
So yeah, it's kind of hard to judge the matchup a little bit because, as we said, the team you're versing is a bit.
No, I think it's a pretty, like, obviously Eviolite meme, whatever. It's just a good team. Like, this is a fundamentally good team. Again, it's mostly fully evolved Pokemon that they decided to give evolutions to. Not mostly, but it's half of that. 5 out of your 11 Pokemon used to be, or Pikachu's didn't used to be fully evolved. So it's 5.
I mean, I do have some insight into this matchup because I have also played BB.
Yep.
But I mean, at least the team's got quite a few frailer mons. Like you can just kind of
if they don't have Eviolite, they don't take hits.
More or less. So if you just go pretty balls to the wall offense, you can do all right.
I think Fletchinder is a Pokemon that suffers the most from this. It's a Pokemon that is naturally quite capable of being a really bulky Pokemon with Eviolite, and is disadvantaged from not having access to it. Outside of that, so you've got Sneasel, which, even with the Eviolite, requires a good deal of investment to be effective at taking strong neutral hits. But, any Pokemon with enough investment can take hits, except for Shedinja. You've got Scyther, who is naturally tanky, but is very capable of being pressured because of its multiplicity weaknesses. So it's sort of a Terra Hog, but unfortunately Fletchender is also Terra Hog, and also Sneasel likes to Terra, and Ursaring likes to Terra, and Pikachu likes to Terra, because a lot of these Pokemon have flawed offensive framing that they need to exploit. And then my team gets sort of bullied by a lot of these Pokemon. They're a really awkward set of speed tiers where my fast guys are good, but all my slow guys really struggle into this team. Hydrapple certainly struggles, but like basically all of my slow guys struggle. And then my fast guys have to be running a decent bit of speed, and they have to be running a decent bit of damage to not get bowled over, especially considering that they do have, like they also need bulk because they do have that Fletchender Tailwind. So I have to think about how I can prevent Gale Wings from going off, and I have to think about what damage I can do to get through the Duraludon, which again is the EV Hog. I have Banette with Frisk, but realistically, overwhelmingly it's Duraludon. Sometimes it might be like Dracloak, sometimes it might be Scyther, but realistically it's going to be Duraludon most games because it is just a fully evolved Pokemon, literally from Gen 8. That they didn't even like, they didn't even really power creep yet, and then they decided to give it EV Light, which was insane. So I have to go very offensive, and I also need to get bulk my Pokemon, and it also needs to be very speed oriented because my Trick Room mode is not going to function against their reckless hate. So we come to team preview. We see that I've gone for 4 immediately offensive frail Pokemon: Weavile, Jolteon, Espeon, Pyroar, as well as then Skarmory and Banette, which are, look, Banette's not tanky, but it can pretend to be. And then I've got Skarmory there, which is Tailwind, right? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Banette is not a tanky guy, but you can invest it, right? But again, you can do about anything. I notice that Basculin doesn't come, which is a Pokemon I was reasonably scared about because it has Aqua Jet, which allows it to deal with speed disputes. We do see Pikachu, and Pikachu is very strong, but the main concern about Pikachu is actually its matchup into Jolteon, because that means that they have Lightning Rod, which can prevent Jolteon from being particularly effective. That said, none of these Pokemon are super surprising. The only real fringe option was Pikachu, and then, maybe they didn't bring Ursaring. I don't know what they necessarily think about on their end, outside of the fact that they should try Tailwind, and that definitely makes sense to me. And then I am thinking, so what I'm going for is I'm concerned about their Tailwind option, and I want to prevent them setting Tailwind. They didn't bring anything that could set Trick Room, so I have an Ice Shard Weavile, and then I want to lead a fast Pokemon next to it that's able to threaten Fletchender. So,
what's your thoughts on where the EV Light is?
Duraludon.
Yeah, probably right.
I always think it's going to be Duraludon in this against this team. This team is not a Pokemon. It does not share that particularly well. Now, I don't leave Frisk this game, which means that I'm a bad player. But I see this, and I'm like, okay, Fake Out is reasonably likely, and then Tailwind is reasonably likely. So I want to try and pressure both slots. Now, I go for the Fake Out into the Fletchender. That does no damage. So immediately I have to think, okay, my opponent is like max defense invested. It could be Eviolite, but I think it's max defense invested, and it does get confirmed in a second. Now, they go for the Terra Fighting thing. Now, I had messed up. Well, I hadn't messed up. I ran Modest on Jolteon, which meant it could be slower than Sneasel. But it could also be Scarf, right? And the way that they played that, trying to pressure through the Jolteon, makes it seem like a Scarf.
100%.
But I also made like bad investments. It could have been Sash and just went to try and remove Jolteon. I was like half expecting a double kick to come out. But yeah, so they get Tailwind. We see that they're Covert Cloak. So we know this is Covert Cloak and just like max defense. And then we know that the Sneasel is, we expect that Sneasel is either Scarf or Sash. So I bring in Skarmory here. Now, they do have like an annoying set of guys for me to deal with. But they are, look, -1, -1. So unless they're Sash, like even if they're Sash, I expect a Triple Axle is going to pick up the Sneasel. And then I'm using Skarmory here. No, actually, I forgot. This was like my worst turn of the game. I wanted to try and get Tailwind of my own, thinking they would double the Weavile, but instead they doubled the Skarmory, which was a good call on their end.
Yeah.
And it wound up being a bad call going for the defensive play on the Weavile.
Because if they deny your Trick Room, like they're in a pretty strong board state.
Yeah, they're in a very they're able to use their offenses from like Duraludon, Ursaring, Scyther, and Pikachu pretty effectively. But yeah, so the one thing I notice is I get Steal Air Scarf, and now I am faster. Unfortunately, they do double it. But I get the Psychic off, so I'm able to remove both their Pokemon. I see this is likely just like Max Defense, because it died to an Espeon Psychic, right? Now I am Specs, but they don't know that. And then I'm like, okay, at this point, I got to see what the two guys in the back were, Drowdon and Ursaring. I feel confident that my I could use a Terra here potentially to try and like save a turn, and like the last turn Tailwind, you know, maybe I can, like, maybe the Drowdon isn't Eviolite and I can like crit through it and then also crit through the Ursaring, but I decide instead that I am just gonna let them KO me, and they do that. I see Facade, so I assume that it's got Flame Orb.
Yeah.
Or Toxic Orb, but I expect Flame Orb. It could be Guts or it could be Quick Feet, but I expect Guts. If it came out and it had Unnerve, I would have thought that it was Eviolite. Yeah, so at this point, I think that they should know that my Espeon is Psychic, Specs, from the Psychic damage into Fletching Up. I don't know if they're calcing. They have no idea what my Skarmory item was. The only thing they know is that it didn't have a Citrus Berry. And then they know the Weavile is its Sash. So I know for sure that they're Scarf. I know for sure that they're Covert Cloak. I'm fairly confident this is Flame Orb or Toxic Orb, and I'm fairly confident this is Eviolite, especially because its Dragon Pulse didn't do boosted damage. And then they should be confident that I'm Specs, but they don't know what Skarmory is. They don't know for sure what Jolteon is, though they probably expect that it's Cloak, and they do know what Weavile is. So then there's Banette and Pyroar, and then Scyther, and Pikachu I expect to be Light Ball or Sash.
So where's your head at going into Game 2 now? Like, what's your thought process? What are you going to do different to adapt?
My main thought process is I need to bring a lead that neither Pokemon is threatened by Scarf Sneasel. So I need to. My opponent doesn't know this, but I'm actually Scarf on Banette. The unfortunate thing is, ordinarily I would try an Ice Shard plus Poltergeist the Fletchender, but because it's so physically defensive, I know it will survive. So I'm hoping potentially they don't lead that. Ideally, like a Scyther, would be a cool lead for me to run into. But I'm thinking I need to lead the Scarf Banette with the Weavile, because that way I can reliably prevent them getting up Trick Room, and I don't expect the Sneasel to be able to do much on turn 1 as a result. Well, obviously, like, it can break down to Sash, but then I get the Scarf because of Pickpocket. I think it also... Oh yeah, but it gets inner focus, so I can't fake it out, right? And that's why I need to be very concerned. So, like, neither of their Pokemon are weak to fake out, so they do go with the Tailwind lead. I get the double Frisk off. Both those items I was already pretty aware of, so the Frisk isn't necessarily providing a great deal of value, but the surprise option of the Terra Rock here, getting that Ice Shot off. Now, I take the Throat Chop here. I take that very well, because what I realized from that is it's, No, I don't know what I realized. There was something I realized at the time, but it was something about the investment. I think that means it's Adamant.
I thought it wasn't Adamant, or I don't know.
I'm pretty sure that means it is Adamant. And then I throw off the Terra Blast. I'd much rather not lock into Terra Blast, but unfortunately that's what I'm stuck with, because Poltergeist doesn't KO. So they get to bring in Duraludon, and then I'm at this point, I'm like, okay. They're locked into the Throat Chop. Sneasel's reasonably likely to switch. I probably want to save Banette because I don't really like clicking Terra Blast here. They could just double the Weavile. So they switch, and then I also switch Jolteon. I actually go for a Protect here because I don't want the Duraludon to be able to break my Sash.
Oh. Do you know what I mean? A random...
Yep.
I was just having a thought. A random funny tech they could have done is brought a Ghost type with no item, because it's not going to hold Eviolite to just eat Poltergeist for days. But, I mean,
they could have brought in a Pokemon, or they could have just brought their normal type.
Yeah, but that's not as funny.
Yeah. So at this point, I'm like, okay, this Snarl Duraludon is annoying, but not really that scary, and I didn't let it break my Sash. Now, they see that I am not Covert Cloak on the Jolteon. Frankly, I don't actually remember what item I am. Oh, I think I'm an offensive boosting item. I think I might be Expert Belt. That's right, yes. I'm Expert Belt Terra Fighting, with the idea being that Terra Fighting Terra Blast KOs Ursaring and can KO Duraludon depending on how spit effort is. Unfortunately, I don't have Terra anymore, so... Yeah, I get the double into the Ursaring because I don't want it to be able to get damage off. It's definitely like the main threatening Pokemon. This Snarl crit is actually quite annoying because it means that the Sneasel can sort of lock into whatever. I just go for a double protect here because I want to see what the Sneasel locks into and I want to see who it's targeting. Now, the fact that it goes for low kick here, I have...
Low sweep.
Low sweep, sorry. Low sweep drops Pokemon's speed by 1 stage, which is annoying. I think about, okay, I could consider going for Ice Shard here, but I don't know if the damage is necessarily going to be relevant because I do have, I believe, Bennett and Espeon in the back. So the question is it worth doing that and then they double this or whatever and I only clicked Ice Shard? Answer is I probably should have clicked Ice Shard. I don't know why I didn't. Or, I do know why. I clicked Triple Axle just in case. But yeah, I go for E-Whip here because that means that Sneasel is very likely, unless it's max speed, to be slower than both my Pokemon on the back. It's always slower than the Bennett, and it's often slower than the Espeon. So, Frisk here, we confirm it's Eviolite. We already sort of figured that out from the fact it took 5 from Electro Web. Now, we go for Poltergeist here. It actually does not KO, but I've paired it with a Dazzling Gleam, and they aren't max speed. The Poltergeist shows me they're actually quite bulky, from the fact that I didn't get that KO. They go for the Draco there. It doesn't really do that much because Duraludon is not that good without a boosting item offensively. It's really relied sort of on sticking around while it has the rest of a team, and then the double up knocks it out from there. So I'm like, okay, the Bennett is not going to work again. I need to come up with a different plan for their speed control lead, which in this case is my own speed control lead.
Yeah, because they haven't brought Pikachu to either game, so...
They haven't brought Pikachu, they haven't brought Scyther. They've only really brought Fletchinder and then potentially Duraludon. We don't know what the Duraludon has. We know that it's clicked Snarl, Dragon Pulse, and Draco Meteor. I don't think it's shown Protect. Yeah, it hasn't. So it could be Protect, it could be Flash Cannon. I think Flash Cannon's reasonably likely. I'm not...
The world where it's Body Press as well.
It could be Thunderbolt, right? Because Thunderbolt allows it to hit Skarmory. I think it's probably Thunderbolt. I don't remember if I thought this at the time. At this point, I'm definitely thinking it's Thunderbolt. But I've got no information on the Scyther or Pikachu, and they've gotten more information on my Pokemon, right? At this point, they don't know what the Jolteon is, just that it's not Cloak and it's not Sash. They know Weavile Sash, they know the Bennett is Scarf, they know the Espeon is... They likely know the Espeon is Specs, and then they don't know anything about the Skarm or the Pyro. So at this point, they've got a pretty reasonable information advantage, but I also have a very good answer to their game plan, which is, instead, I just lead my own Tailwind. And my exact thought process is, I want Tailwind, and I want the Pokemon that can KO one of their Pokemon at lead. One of the great things we know about Sneasel is its sex. Now, they go for a switch here. I get a good 32% into that Duraludon with Psychic, and a Spadef drop, which means I'm guaranteed to 2 KO. It's a roll otherwise for me to get KOs into it with another 2 Psychics, but I'm reasonably likely to take it out with a double up anyways from Psychic and Body Press, so they have to consider tearing it. Yep.
Is there a world, I don't actually know the Cal, is there a world where a Fletchinder Overheat plus Sneasel kills your Skarmory, or no?
Yeah.
So you weren't, you didn't think that was an option, you weren't, going to commit defensive terror there? I'm just questioning, I'm just wondering if...
I could have committed defensive terror, but if they just spent the turn, if they just sacked their Sneasel for no reason, I can just bring in Weavile next turn and then double the Fletchinder.
I guess. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So if they attack with Fletchinder, they just lose, right? Because they don't have Tailwind. The thing that I'm trying to do is stop them from having a Tailwind advantage. I stop them having a Tailwind advantage by having by us both having Tailwind, or by neither of us having Tailwind.
Yeah.
So yeah, they switch out here. That means they no longer have Gale Wings, which is really good for me because it means that Espeon is faster. It means that potentially Skarm is faster, though probably still likely not. Now, I go for the Body Press here, and I actually really want to remove the Fletchinder here, because like I said in the previous game, I'm not that worried about the Duraludon, and the Fletchinder is annoying because it can overheat the Skarmory. So bam, I get rid of that. Crit doesn't matter. We saw that it died to the thing the previous time. That Snarl's knocking out is because of that Terra Dark, giving that 5 base power boost up to 60. But yeah, and then I'm able to reliably put it in a position where Body Press plus whatever will knock it out, and then this Ursaring is just not going to be able to beat Skarmory, let alone Skarmory plus Weavile by itself.
Press.
Yeah, so I just was... Yeah, their team was really reliant on the Tailwind in the matchup. I think this is perhaps a general issue with BRS team. So, like I said, max defense Fletchinder. Now, there's a random red card Scyther. I didn't ask why. I don't want to ask why. I don't want to know why.
That's scary. Don't ask why.
It's got Tailwind. I don't want to know. There's a Terra Ghost, a Terra Electric Pikachu. I don't know what would make Pikachu come here, right?
Like Terra normal E-speed? Maybe?
No, I don't know why they brought this Terra Electric Pikachu into this matchup.
Oh yeah.
Like, I've got this Hydraffle, I've got the Jolteon, you know, I've got Clodsire. I don't. It had knockoff as its only coverage move. It was terrifying. So yeah, it was Thunderbolt last on the Duraludon. Frankly, because Skarmory is sturdy, even if they Thunderbolted and the Thunderbolt knocked it to sturdy, unless they got powerful powered, it wouldn't have mattered. And then because they weren't snarling, the Espeon would have got another turn. We saw that they were max for def invested on the Duraludon. Having no speed meant that they were this isn't a matchup where they're really able to get turns. They were super reliant on getting a speed advantage to be able to get Ursaring to do stuff, otherwise, like we saw, it just dies, and to get Duraludon to do stuff, otherwise, like we saw, it takes 3 hits to die, and it doesn't KO any of my Pokemon. Because it's not very good. I mean, yeah. It's hugging Eviolite from other Pokemon on the team, and that comes at the cost of being able to win games. Now, we see very high physical defense investment on the Sneasel that allowed it to take out Poltergeist.
I just noticed that ate the Poltergeist for a reason.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I went for Dazzling Gleam. Otherwise, I could have just Psychicked the funny guy. But yeah, so yeah, invested, and they said it was for a triple axle, which is fair enough. Yeah, so Ursaring, funny guy, Scyther, funny guy. But yeah, the Ursaring was super reliant on being able to get a Tailwind advantage, otherwise it was incredibly prone to just getting beaten up. And then because it's using Eviolite instead of an offensive item, very similar to the issue with the Tauros, it needs team support to be able to function effectively, and it just wasn't doing enough with Snarl, and it wasn't doing enough with Draco, and it wasn't going to be able to break through sturdy with Thunderbolt. So it meant that if I was playing enough offensive pressure, they weren't going to be able to get through it. This game, I didn't really apply enough offensive pressure. They wound up really effectively removing the Jolteon, so it's like, okay, what is the Weavile doing? And then Skarmory and Espeon weren't going to be able to break through them while they had Tailwind. And then we got here, and then as I was able to prevent them getting Tailwind by using that Banette. I was able to use my speed advantage to be able to break through their team. And then game 3, I was able to neutralize the Tailwind by going for Tailwind. Again, like I said, if they had doubled the Skarm, then Sneasel's dead, and Fletchinder is able to be Ice Shard Thunder Psychicked. Also, I think they needed Terra... No, they wouldn't have. Overheat's strong enough. But yeah. Well, if they don't go for Tailwind, they lose. But if they do go for Tailwind, they have to then... they face a lot of very difficult positions. I think they played that game really well, and I made some misplays.
Audience, I'm going to have to love and leave you. Yeah. My wife needs to go to bed, and she doesn't want me being loud in a voice call. And I have to go to bed too. So my good friend Electric is going to continue going over the rest of his game, and then go over the Keith's game as well.
Yeah, and then I was Papa on the Scarm because I had Citrus on Pyro, and that's why it didn't activate. I think... Yeah, no, because the other one was first. But yeah. Thank you so much for hopping along.
No worries. Enjoy the rest of your time chatting.
See ya.
Ciao.
Yeah, I had Foul Play here for Ursaring as well. That was my my best coverage into it. I could knock it if it didn't have a Slay Mob up, and I could Foul Play through it. Yeah, Fake Out just meant that... Sorry, I went the wrong way. Fake Out just meant that the Ursaring wasn't going to be able to do as much as it would hope to, and that was obviously a difficult challenge for it. I don't actually know. I assume this is like a football team, potentially a college football team, because they're American. I don't know why the Pokemon did this. I say that in the Little Cup League, I named the teams after a feeder, like a QR, which is like the state rugby league teams players. So not like the national team. So I can't really be knocking on it. But I think I recognize this name. Do not recognize any of the other names though. They recognize some of the surnames, and from what I understand, American football is mostly like people getting their family members jobs. So now we come to the third game, and we see another terrible... Sorry, the other thing I meant to mention, terrible Hydrapple matchup. Good into Hydrapple, good into Hydrapple, good into Hydrapple, good into Hydrapple. like I mentioned, the whole thing was about getting the speed, and look, this is why I drafted so many fast, frail Pokemon. It's also why I drafted explosive options like Staravia. It's also why I drafted defensive stalwarts, as well as Pokemon with reasonable immunity and resists like Skarmory and Banette. It's really about being able to keep up. Like, my opponent's team was so reliant on speed control, and I had positioned my team in a way that I wasn't. I built specifically for it, but if I had a trample and stuff, it would have really been a problem. Actually, they have taunt. No taunt on the Fletcher. It was Wisp Blast, so they wouldn't have been able to beat my Trick Room particularly well either, I don't think. I guess they could have used like the fake out Pikachu, but that's not going to stop a Banette. Yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, so we did see that they were adamant, and yeah, the bulk was actually pretty intense. But yeah, I had enough. I had the funny Scarf Banette, which was slightly faster than their fastest guy. And then I had the Specs Espeon wound up being a pretty solid pinch hitter in that game. To use another American. Now we come to the last game, which is Firefalls against Sheath Keldon. I am joined alone. Now, you may remember the last game that the Keith team lost to Swagger, Earth Prankster, and Mirror Herb. And then we see Grafire Hitmonlee on this team. I'm like, I hope that doesn't happen again. And then we see Sunny Day, like potential Sunny Day Charizard option. I'm like, this team seems very much like it would like to later Grafire next to a Pokemon that it can support, whether it's with Swagger or whether it's with Sunny Day. Which sort of reminds me of that Sableye team I had last season, where you can just sort of lead it with whatever and then hope stuff works out. But yeah, we also got Don't Say Psych, the classic. Or is it Say Psych? I actually don't remember which of the nicknames I went with. But I do love me some Cyclozar. And then, yeah, we got plenty of annoying Pokemon. We see that this team has only 2 ice resists. Technically 3. So there's Chinchou and Inteleon, both the water types, and then the Magnezone. So that is one that means that Weavile's Triple Axle is likely to be very good here. Weavile is faster than the entire team, which means it's able to push out damage. It also means that the opponent's going to be thinking about speed control pretty actively. And yeah, do have the option of Trick Room with Grumpig, do have the option of Tailwind with Flygon, do have the option of Icy Wind Mismagius, potentially even an Icy Wind on Weavile, but I don't know if that's necessarily something Weavile's looking at. And I said Trick Room on Grumpig, but not Trick Room on this. But yeah, the good thing about the Charizard matchup in this particular game is that we do have that, do have the Flygon that resists, and we do have Lantern, but Grumpig is thick fat. That's what I'm trying to say. So we have like a bonus resist that we wouldn't otherwise have had. So it means that you can just sort of run the team very specially defense oriented. And the other thing that I think about sort of in this thing is that this team actually does not take hits very well from Slowking, right? Psychic, Sludge Bomb bonus for against this one, right? There's Porygon, which is definitely like tanky, but isn't going to necessarily withstand Psychics because of the Spit F drop chance. You know, if you're clicking all 16 Psychics, you expect is it 16 or 24? I'm not sure off the top of my head. But if you're clicking every Psychic, you would expect to get a drop, or burn through all 8 recovers. And then yeah, you've got the Flygon, the Magnezone here, which is weak to Flamethrower. So you only need one coverage move to break through the entire team with the offensive Gala Slowking, though you probably still want to run a decent bit of tank. And then it's a similar thing with Grumpig, right? Grumpig then has Earth Power for Magnezone, and Psychic allows it to break through the entire team. So definitely a reasonably strong matchup for those sorts of guys. Potentially a Mismagius could try and fit Psychic Dazzling Gleam to try and hit the 2 normal types, and then not very good ghost checks either. And honestly, even as it goes, not very good steel checks. Inteleon's not a great steel check, and then if you have something to hit Charizard, but Berserker doesn't actually naturally have something to hit Charizard, but it does have the ability to cover. Sorry, that's not true. It has Thunder. That 50% accurate on Sun move. Actually, is that true, or is that only Hurricane? I think it might only be Hurricane. I think it might be 70% accurate in Sun, but also not off a very high special attack stat. But definitely an option. So a lot of things that makes this actually a bit of a challenging Charizard matchup. But certainly Charizard, deals a very large amount of damage to mons like Hydrapple or Weavile. Yeah, a lot of very, very hostile matchup for Hydrapple, again, with another Cyclozar, with the Grafire here, with the Inteleon. I mean, look, certainly if they're going like Swagger Souls, that's something which is going to be a real problem for Hydrapple as well. Because a +2 Acro is going to do very, very large damage. So, and yeah, Prankster Encore is really annoying for a lot of Pokemon. We get to the lead matchup. You see Porygon here, so we don't see Inteleon. And then on this side, we don't see Hydrapple. You know, that suggests to us, I think, they're not going Tailwind option. I think they're probably pretty reasonably happy not to see Flygon. Flygon, they can pressure, because they do want to run Ice Moves on stuff already, but it is annoying for Grafire in particular, because it doesn't have a good normal stab, so it's really only got like Gunk Shot, and then coverage moves. Generally, Knockoff is the main one there. But yeah, pretty happy not to see it. Not to see the Flygon, because it also means no Tailwind, and Tailwind can neutralize the Hitmonlee Speed Boost from Unburden, as well as obviously make Pokemon faster. That's it. Probably annoyed to see Grumpig. And then Venomoth is, I think, a bit of an X factor into this matchup. They means that they may be worried about a potential Rage Powder Trick Room lead, which I actually think then pressures them to lead Charizard, because none of the other Pokemon are particularly good into redirection. Firefalls we don't expect to have necessarily brought safety goggles. You know, Lurantis is obviously reasonably slow, and they do have Trick Room options on their own without Lurantis Porygon, both of which are very naturally slow Pokemon. I think, yeah, Slowking is the slowest Pokemon in the matchup, but they're both slower than Berserker. So they do have to think about that. They definitely do have to think about that. So we come to that team preview, and we see what I think, if I am Keith here, I'm thinking, okay, this is Sunny D Charizard, and they're going to click Heat Wave, or potentially they're going to overheat the Slowking, depending on what their item is, or what their investment is. The Charizard could be Covert Cloak, the Grafire could be Covert Cloak, the Charizard could be Terra Ghost. My first thought here is, they are probably well insulated against Fake Out here. Either they are setting Sunny Day and clicking Protect, or this is Covert Cloak and then this is Terra Ghost, or this is Terra Ghost and this is Covert Cloak. So it's generally not going to be particularly effective to throw out a Fake Out this turn. And if you do think it's potentially a Sunny Day option, then you may want to throw the damage into Grafire. You know, there's all these sorts of thoughts here. But you're very scared that if you are trying to set Trick Room, if this is like, you know, potentially a Berserker and maybe, say, a Grumpig or a Venomoth in the back, then you're worried that the Slowking might faint on this turn. So we see how it goes. Now, pressure. Now, this means two things, right? Pressure is the default ability on Weavile. So either it means that your opponent forgot to change the ability, or it might mean that they're not Sash, right? Because the reason that you run Pickpocket with Sash is, or like they're not a consumable item, is because if your Sash is consumed, like we saw in that previous game, then you steal the opponent's item. So that may be a tip-off that they're not Sash, or it may just be that they've forgotten, or maybe that they're trying to bait you into not being Sash, and etc, etc, etc. Mind game. Now, if anyone has heard much rumors about this from the Growlithe game, last game, Heat Wave is not a great move, so I'm sure that means that being the responsible person for Firefalls is they're going to click Overheat, much more accurate. But yeah, I think reasonably unsurprising set of 3 turns. Sunny Day, very expected with Charizard. The Terra Ghost, pretty reasonably expected as the ability to prevent a Fake Out from Weavile for affecting. I think this basically confirms that the Grafire is... the Sunny Day uses 2 PP, but okay. Man, double's weird. I wouldn't have thought that happened, but I don't think that pressure's going to be relevant anyways. The fact that pressure doesn't stack is always sad to me. But yeah, so the Terrifier here means his G King has likely got a good bit of Spit F chops, and is probably going to be taking this Charizard hit pretty well. Now, the Heat Wave miss is unfortunate. This shows that the Charizard is Scarf. That is very telling. Terra Ghost probably indicates Scarf when you're doing it against Weavile, but very much showing that Scarf. Now, the triple axle going into the Grafire here shows this Grafire is very bulky, because you would not ordinarily expect a Grafire to live the triple axle unless it was max HP, and you certainly would expect it to live it this cleanly. Then you see a Power Gem coming out from the Spadef G-King into the Charizard, and you're like, okay, you know, that is sort of how it's invested, right? But this means the Grafire gets to click a bonus move. It could Encore the Glow-King, or if they are concerned about Sash Weavile, they could double the Weavile. So the Solar Power here, very good. With the Power Gem, you're like worried, okay, Psychic may be able to take it out, but with the Terrify, you're very concerned that Flamethrower might be coming out and actually being able to use your Sun even better than you are, because the Charizard no longer resists fire. This is why I like Terrify Charizard a lot last season. Being able to resist fire really helps, because you've suddenly become weak to fire the other way around, right? So you see another Heat Wave come out. Now, we see it go to Sash. Now, this burn's really important, right? Because it means even if it does KO Grafire, since the Grafire didn't go for Pranks to move, right? Even if it does KO Grafire, it's still going to die, and it's possible that with the reduced damage, the Grafire isn't going to die. Obviously, this is a pretty fair trade-off to the Heat Wave miss, right? But an impactful turn, because while if not for that burn, you generally would expect both the Grafire and the Charizard to faint this turn. You would expect the Grafire to get knocked out by the Weavile. Theoretically, a triple axle could still pick it up from this range, but you would expect them to go for a more conservative play like knockoff if they potentially have it. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like Ice Shard KOs, so otherwise they probably would have gone for that there. But yeah, the physical bulk means that you don't get to know whether they have Ice Shard or not, right? But yeah, so we see a knockoff go off here into there, confirms that it is Covert Cloak. And so we know both of these items 100% million% for sure, and we know this item 100 million% for sure. But that burn means the knockoff not KOing, which means that the Grafire gets an extra turn of life. And you hope that they didn't double the Grafire, but no, so if they double the Grafire, obviously that's its own issue. But the attack did go into that Charizard, and is able to pick up that KO. So you see this G-King here. It is annoyed by the Grafire for sure, but it does still have the fact that its typing is very advantageous here. Now you see Porygon come in, get that download attack boost. Both of these Pokemon are very naturally specially defensive. Mismagius is very bad physical defense, and it averages out the physical defense of the two Pokemon. So even if you are max defense on the Slowking, unless you are also max defense on the Mismagius, very likely to get a physical attack boost. In prep, that may make you want to lean towards running a physical Porygon. I don't remember with base Porygon what its stat, whether it prefers physical or special. I know with Porygon 2 it's the same for both. With Porygon 1, or it may not be the same actually, I think there might be some difference. Porygon 1 is more special attack, 85 versus 60. But when you're running into a matchup like this, you could theoretically, certainly your opponents should run Spadef, if only because Charizard, right? And Inteleon, but then also because Porygon, your opponent should consider running Spadef so that Porygon gets an attack boost, right? But then that may make you want to run a physical Porygon. Yeah, there's always like sort of thoughts there, but you know, it may not happen. The other thing about Porygon is it's tanky, but it's not super strong without that special attack boost, and that can limit the impact of its things. Oh yeah, we saw that this Grafire was very physically defensive. That means it's going to be slower than Mismagius, so they have the confidence to be able to go for this Icy Wind here, be able to make sure that Porygon is slower than Slowking, and take advantage of that, as well as being able to pick up that Grafire. Being able to get some chip onto Porygon and remove Grafire is very good. The Shadow Ball there is definitely a pretty significant chip, but it's probably not super likely to bring out a win. That Shadow Ball there shows maybe the advantage to Assault Vest, or maybe it's just very specially defensive. Superpower KO there, you don't necessarily know what's going on there if you are Keith here, but you're pretty happy to see the Porygon go down to that Icy Wind plus the two Flamethrowers and Sun. The Icy Wind net damage actually wound up being pretty relevant. It seems like there's definitely some bulk, certainly EVO Light on the Porygon. And then at this point, you're pretty happy with these two special attackers. The double up here, getting that KO on Lurantis. But that Life Orb turn is actually pretty significant, because that means the Fire Falls now knows what item the Grumpig is. So if they ever run a knockoff into it, they want to hit, they know it's going to be pretty offensive. So they don't know what the item the Slowking is, They weren't able to hit it with knockoff. They know for sure the Weavile Sash. They don't know what the Mismagius is, and they don't know what the Slowking is. The Porygon we know is EVL Light. This one, you maybe think the Lurantis is a Assault Vest. It didn't get a Citrus Berry, which is probably the next item that you would expect it to maybe run, though Cyclone can run as well. Grafairy we know is Cloak, and Charizard we know is Scarf. And the main thing that you are thinking about is how can they adapt the lead. Certainly, if you had the exact same lead situation, and you throw a knockoff into the Charizard turn 1, even if it doesn't Terra Ghost, just knocking off its Scarf completely removes its ability to effectively impose its force in this matchup. So you think that maybe they're going to switch to like a Swagger Grafairy strat. Now, the Slowking Gala could be own tempo. We know it's not Curious Medicine, otherwise it would have shown. It could be Regenerator. They didn't switch, which they may have done if it was Regenerator, or they may not have done and may have just viewed it useful to get more damage. But it could be own tempo, which makes you immune to the confusion from Swagger. So like the Weavile Slowking Gala lead means that you can't get confused by Swagger. But what it does unfortunately mean, you still get the attack boost, which means they can still mirror Herbert. It's just that you don't get the confusion. So you probably want to lead the same. Maybe bring a Venomoth in the back, maybe bring a Berserker in the back. You know, you may think about changing up the back, but you think the Weavile Slowking Gala lead is still pretty good from Keith, because it is the main check to their main switch up, which is potentially the Swagger Mirror Herb lead. I think definitely anticipate Hitmonlee to be coming at lead in this game. The other thing we saw Sunday and Knockoff here. You think it may have Gunk, or it may just have 2 support moves. One of them has to try and deal with Trick Room, so you think it may be Taunt, maybe Encore, but maybe you don't necessarily plan around that. You don't expect there to be another Charizard lead, because that did not wind up going particularly well. So we see Pressure again. We see Grafairy Hitmonlee here. 100% you're expecting the Swagger play here, or potentially a fake out from Hitmonlee and some other nonsense from Grafairy. So double protect here. We see actually a Quick Claw activate on the Slowking. So now they know what the Slowking's item is. Quick Claw did not activate last game. Obviously there are multiple turns where, well, not multiple turns. This one in particular, if this Flamethrower had gone off before the Heat Wave went off, obviously that was an incredible turn, but wound up being a relatively one game anyways. Honestly, I think Mismag and Grumpig both still make sense in the back, or Berserker if you're worried about them adapting to a Trick Room version. But both of those Pokemon seem perfectly confident. So we see an Endure and a Knockoff come out here. Now the first thing you think when you see a Pokemon click Endure is that it, especially with a Burden, is that it has the Lychee Berry. If it's not like Hitmonlee, you think it's Salic. If it doesn't have a Burden, you think it's Salic, which is the +1 speed Pinch Berry. But if it has Unburden, then you think it's the +1 attack or +1 special attack berry. So Lychee, or I can't actually remember the other one off the top of my head. But you think, so now at this point you've got information on 5 of the items, potentially, if you think it's a Assault Vest, but you don't know for sure. The Lurantis item is, maybe not something you're aware of. Especially, the other thing I mentioned is we saw the Lurantis go after the Slowking, so that either means that Slowking is not super slow, which as we saw, it wasn't Trick Room itself, right? Or like it didn't go for Trick Room. The game plan didn't seem Trick Room, and they brought it without Trick Room game plan. But that could mean that the Lurantis is a power item, or it could just mean that the Lurantis is min speed and that the Slowking is not. We see a Knockoff go into the Weavile. Into the Weavile to try and break that sash, and we see Endure to try and get. The reason for it is Reversal is a move which I think is 40 base power or something, but it comes 200 base power when the Pokemon has 1 HP left, or I think it's 5% or less. It's quite random, but 200 base power as a fighting move obviously is good. It's even going to be threatening to Slowking, and Slowking 4x resists. Certainly going to be threatening to a Terrifier Slowking. Endure has a chance of failing if you use it twice in a row. So this turn, we see Triple Axle play here because the Hitmonlee is either going to attack or switch. I'm going slightly too fast. Now the Encore coming out into the Slowking. Didn't see Encore last game. Pretty annoyed by Encore because it means that the Slowking is then forced to switch, which is a D-tempo that you didn't necessarily want. But at this point, you're like, okay, well, they're not going to be able to stop the Weavile. They're not going to be able to make the Weavile faint. So you can always knock off the Charizard and ensure that it's completely... it's not able to threaten the rest of your team. So then you're down to Grafaiai, the Hitmonlee that you think is only going to be good if it gets the Endure off, because it's reversal. You don't know what coverage move it has for thing, but you'd expect probably knockoff, because a bunch of Psychic types and a Ghost type. Won't necessarily be able to hit Venom off if that's in the back. Depending on how what the strategy is, there's all of these sorts of things there. But the fact that it's reliant on Endure, and you're basically reliant on Keith playing really badly, to put it succinctly, is a sign that you don't have to be super worried about it. So the main scary thing is just making sure this Charizard doesn't do anything, right? You got the Jeking that's going to be able to take it well, but you'd rather not lose Mons if you don't have to. So you do have the ability to force this trade with Weavile. You expect even with the Wisp Burn that it would faint. So you trade the Weavile for the Charizard, and you're like, okay, so now they have Hitmonlee that we're not scared of, and then they've got Grafaiai that we might be scared of. We know that it's Cloak, but it's a full, but we do have two Psychic types, even if the Slowking isn't Psychic currently. And that's something that we can be relatively confident in going to be able to do it. Icy Wind here means that potentially even after an Endure and a Speed Boost, they're not actually going to be that fast if they do get the berry off. Unfortunately not able to get that speed there, but yeah, able to put that offensive Psychic into Grafaiai and it just goes down. Also able to do a lot to that Hitmonlee. So the thing you learn with that Icy Wind, Hitmonlee's got very good natural speed F. That means that it is zero investment, like zero IVs in HP and special defense, presumably also physical defense, to try and guarantee that it gets put down to Sash. Because trust me, I've done this like Endure strat before, and if your Pokemon does not go down to 1, that feels really bad. Yeah, so we see another Endure come out here. Again, just an Icy Wind to drop its speed. Oh no, sorry, we do actually see the double up here. I forgot about that. And it does get the Lychee boost. Porygon is not necessarily immediately threatening to the Pokemon on the field here. The idea is because it's -2, it's still going to be slower than Mismagius even with the speed boost. And now because Trick Room goes up, because it's got the Unburden boost, it's now going to be faster than Slowking. So we can sort of completely rule out the Hitmonlee. And because Endure and Protect, you can't click Endure and then Protect and then Endure and Protect. They have the same discount counter, just like with other like King Shield or even stuff like Quick Guard. Don't have failure things themselves, but mean that Protect can fail. So you see a Shadow Ball come out here, we see a Power Gem. The Shadow Ball damage is pretty reasonable, right? Into the Mismagius. The Mismagius really wants to try and survive these turns of Trick Room so that it can exert pressure while the Porygon's pressured to go back into Trick Room. But it can't afford to burn every turn, right? So it's sort of alternating it. As the Porygon here, you need to remove one of these Pokemon and then hope that you don't get Psychic Speed F dropped, basically. Like, you just aren't going to be able to beat Slowking before Mismagius faints, so you want in Trick Room to try and remove Mismagius, and then hope that you can 1v1 Slowking, which again relies on not getting Flamethrower burnt. May lose the game for you, but Psychic Speed F drops definitely will. Every time that that Slowking clicks Psychic instead of Flamethrower, you're pretty happy. Flamethrower instead of Psychic, you're pretty happy, again, unless you're Terra Dark or something. So, yeah. Able to remove the Mismagius there. Again, still no idea what this Mismagius is, right? But able to get this recover off on the last turn of Trick Room, and every time, like I said, they go for Flamethrower, you're reasonably happy. Missed that roll there. It was 31, if it obviously did another 31 there, but we see this roll. They've done 28, 29, whatever, so that's probably a max roll. Then it comes down to, can you stall out every single one of these 14 Psychics, and then also the Flamethrowers with your recovers? Because let's be honest, it's probably not going to be able to break the Slowking. Also, it needed on this turn not to get Quick Claw activated, but it just comes down to avoiding the 10% throughout the entire course of a match, and then the crit here means that, yeah, literally no chance. But very unlikely to recover after that, like to be able to actually beat it after that Psychic Speed F drop. Probably should have been throwing out more Psychics. So that is a 2-0 game there. We see, like we saw, Scarf Charizard, Cloak Grafaiai. We see it's actually Iron Ball on Lurantis, so it's like designed to be a Trick Room, either Facilitator or Check, not necessarily entirely clear. But 4 attacks, no Protect. Definitely good news for, but yeah, quite specially defensive as well. which is the other thing that we thought about, was that we saw that it wasn't taking a lot from its special attack, and we see that's as a result of investment, not an Assault Vest. And yeah, the Iron Ball explains why it was slower than the Galarian Slowking. We see the Porygon here is actually quite offensively invested, but does have that 76 special defense. So it was very much, very likely designed to try and take on the Slowking, potentially be able to Shadow Ball it itself, especially if the Slowking had Slack off in its own right. But very reliant on that download boost, right? 180 quiet with no stab move. Ice Beam Shadow Ball's just it, so you have to Terra Ghost to be able to get the stab, but then if you Terra Ghost, then you're weak to Miss Magus all of a sudden. Definitely a difficult position. Upper Hand is a very cool bring on the Hitmonlee. The Upper Hand means that it's able to prevent being revenged by Ice Shard from Weavile. That said, it only has single target moves, so even if it Upper Hands a Weavile Ice Shard, and for one thing, if the Weavile doesn't have Ice Shard or doesn't click Ice Shard, you die anyways, right? The partner Pokemon can just threaten to kill the Hitmonlee. So the issue is that Grafire is not a very effective support with the Taunt and Encore. It's reliant on locking a Pokemon into Encore or Taunt every single turn to stop the Hitmonlee from being KO'd by being targeted by both slots, even if it trades. We see this Cyclozara is Breaking Swipe. It's actually Acrobatics and Shed Tail. Acrobatics, reasonably strong neutral move into Key's team. But yeah, definitely like the interesting Terra Poison Jab. We see here one Pokemon doesn't have a defense. No, that's not true. Yeah, so every Pokemon resists fire. Terra Rock, Terra Fire, Terra Water, and then Thick Fat, or has the Focus Sash, which is a pseudo fire resist. So the team is very much indexed on being able to shrug off whatever the guy's called, Charizard. And then, yeah, Venomoth, didn't see it coming. Actually, like an offensive Quiver Dance set. Like we were saying with the Slowking's poison offense, even the poison move didn't come. Pretty reasonably good into this team. Certainly paired with Tinted Lens, which means that Magazone doesn't actually resist Bug Buzz. Pretty reasonably good into the team. And then Quiver Dance plus Terra Water means that you can sort of tank through Charizard moves, because you do have that resist. As well as Inteleon, if it had come. Berserker here, again, like we said, that Steel offense is pretty good, with Terra Blast Rock there to hit the Charizard, and then CC to hit that Magnezone, as well as, what's the Pokemon called? Inteleon and Chincho. But yeah, being able to take advantage of the Sun in that first game, very good. We did see this is actually a min speed, so Keith could have learned that the Lurantis was Trick Room because he's zero speed. Was Iron Ball or a power item? I'm not sure why it was Iron Ball over power item. I guess Iron Ball's better if someone else tricks you. But yeah, it's always an interesting thought there. But yeah, definitely an interesting game, interesting set of sets. I think, like I said, look, I think you're generally much more scared of the Swagger set than you are of something like Lychee Berry, because once you see this, you just either get speed control so that you don't care about the Unburden, or you don't activate and ignore it because Reversal is just so weak the entire time, and you're just like, okay, you're clicking Knockoff, which is, it's not a bad move by any means, but it's not going to help you win the game. And then the Upper Hand is cool, but Upper Hand is just a very gimmicky move because it relies on your opponent specifically clicking a priority attacking move. The fact that it doesn't work on Prankster is really dumb. But yeah, certainly a difficult set for this, a difficult matchup for this set. These sets to overcome, because they were really only had like the Charizard is offensive, and then like the Porygon if it gets a download boost special attack, which is very unlikely in this matchup. Or like Terra Ghost is doing okay, but so much of this team is specially bulked out. We got the Assault Vest here. I guess so much of this team. This got the Quiver Dance here to facilitate it, but this Pokemon is naturally specially defensive, and then this Pokemon is naturally specially defensive, as well as having that special defense investment. Like, this wasn't even a particularly offensive Slowking, and it was still quite a challenge for the team to deal with. Imagine if this instead had been of like that defense investment that had been invested in special attack, and it was actually hitting through that Porygon quicker. Definitely wound up being a challenge. It just shows how volatile these matchups can be. Download is such a powerful ability if you get the right one. But in singles, like, so much of the game came down to, okay, I have spare EVs and I'm playing against a Genesect or a Porygon 2 or whatever. I'll just run against the Genesect Phys-Def investment so it doesn't boost its E-Speed, U-turn, whatever, and against the Porygon 2 run Spidef investment so that it has to be clicking return, which isn't even in the game anymore. So at this point it's clicking like Facade, I think. Definitely a challenge for a Porygon player to adapt to, I think, in the modern game. It's so strong with that +1 special attack, because it turns out +1 special attack for free is strong, but if you can deny getting that, then, like you saw, it really struggles to break through. I think, like, it was dealing with this Gulp Berry, but not very bulk invested Mismagius, and not dealing with it well. It got KO'd by the Icy Wind plus the 2 Flamethrowers and Sun. Even with its special defense investment, it was able to take the 2 Flamethrowers, right? But not with that Icy Wind chip. And then beyond that, it was then having to try and stall out the Slowking. I mean, certainly if the Slowking had been Citrus Berry instead of Quick Claw, that could have been a real challenge as well. So, definitely difficult things to think about. But that's it. This Charizard damage is really good, but I don't know if it necessarily had the follow-up, or even really the support to facilitate that Charizard damage. That's why Sableye was just so broken, was because Stab Foul Play is such a ridiculous option to have. It checks a lot of the Pokemon that otherwise are difficult for Charizard to deal with. And like even in this matchup, we saw how few of these Pokemon took Dark Moves well, and it's not like Weavile's taking it great when it's Sash. So definitely something to think about. But Grafaier is definitely still really threatening. Prankster Encore, absolutely backbreaking. I think the Prankster Encore is probably the reason that we didn't see Venomoth at all, right? Getting Prankster Encore into Quiver Dance is an immediate loss. And same thing with Fake Out from the Berserker. Possibly why the Weavile didn't have here, but like we saw, it had Knockoff presumably for the Water types, and then Low Kick presumably for Magnezone. But yeah, it was definitely another one where offense was the main thing that defined that game. They had a really offensive lead with a Charizard, but they didn't have the ability to sustain it, because the Hitmonlee is not offensive until it's got the thing up right. It's very, very mid-range combo with the Enduro Lychee Berry, especially with Reversal. Obviously if you're a CC, you're doing more damage immediately, doing less damage in the long run, and that is a trade-off itself. But the Grafaier, very bulky, not like a decent bit of speed, but not a crazy amount of speed, and then that Knockoff as its only attacking move. Again, nice into the team in general, but only able to pressure some Pokemon. Not really going to be threatening, certainly a Terrid guy, but like it's not going to be threatening the Weavile, it's not going to be threatening Venomoth, it's not going to be threatening Berserker. Not that Grafaier has great tools, right? That's the concern with Grafaier. So it's really a question of how much offense you have, and then how much you can push it if you're seeing the game in that offensive game plan, right? Trying the really offensive turn 1 in this game with then having a pretty passive back end, or like not super passive, right? Because obviously it's a Trick Room team, sort of mid-rangey there, but like that did not jive at all with this plan. It's also why I like Terrafire. I keep saying why I like Terrafire. The reason I like Terrafire is because KOing Pokemon is better than not KOing Pokemon, right? It's also why I was running Specs and not Scarf. I think it's very difficult to try and answer a Pokemon like Weavile with a Charizard, right? You really want to already have speed control against it, or to remove the Weavile before the Charizard comes in, because Scarf Charizard isn't going to be doing that much damage, and it's very prone to just taking hits, even with the considerable bulk this Charizard had, right? Like, it took that triple axle well in game 2, but it still took a triple axle in game 2, right? Just a very difficult situation for the team to be in, because the slots were too isolated. This Trick Room core did not work with the Sun core, did not work with the Unburned Lychee Berry. It can work with Cyclizar, like that Cyclizar play with Lurantis was really good. We saw them try to do it in this game, but Cyclizar just died to Weavile, right? Cyclizar was Terra Steel, which is cool and all, right? Like, it probably did get a Shed Tail off, but then you don't have Shed Tail on the other Pokemon. You've got no idea if your opponent, the opponent can just kill the Porygon. It's a very difficult turn, right? Certainly, Knockoff is the most likely move to come into Porygon on that turn, and it's Terra Ghost. So, definitely a challenge. Like, if that lead of the Berserker Slowking, just went for a knockoff and Psychic into Porygon that turn, you're probably not getting Trick Room up. So having too many of these combos on the same team meant that you weren't able to bring a cohesive team of 4, and if those combos weren't popping off, you then had to try really hard to transition between those different game modes, and that was something that just having offense with some sustain, like we saw this very bulky Slowking, was doing damage, but it was very bulky oriented, had the Sash there to give the stability, especially combined with Protect, and then we see the Colbert there also combined with Protect, staying off against the fact that this Pokemon is a knockoff and this Pokemon is a knockoff, and they throw the attacking moves into it. Probably a Lychee Berry. Probably does not KO because of the Colbert. So definitely a sign of how these combos can, like this week in general shows that these combos can be really strong, but if your opponent is indexed for them and your opponent has the right answers to them, and your opponent is then able to sustain that offense and not allow you to transition between those game modes, it can be very difficult to switch off that game plan. I think that is sort of something that we saw in all of these games. We saw this combo. They had the Shed Tail Trick Room combo, and this thing there, and it was very difficult to transition between them. Very difficult to keep them in the same teams. When I'm trying to build a Trick Room mode for a team, like we see in this case, and I did build with Keith, no Trick Room on either of these Pokemon, and that was because we just didn't necessarily have Pokemon that work great in the Trick Room mode, so instead these guys were meant to tech against the opposing Trick Room. And then tried to build them in a way that would function in the regular game plan. As well as bait Trick Room, right? But this team wasn't able to... Like, in this game, it transitioned reasonably well into Trick Room. The problem is that it was still losing, even though it was moving first. And it was only moving first because of Icy Wind, right? But I would say if it was moving first in general, that would be better for it, rather than having to set Trick Room. But being able to... not being able to transition between those modes and have like a full healthy team was a real struggle. They relied on having these other pieces like the Grafai to get the Trick Room up, but then that Grafai is not going to serve them particularly effectively in Trick Room. So yeah, it's definitely a real challenge when trying to build in this format, especially because a lot of this low tier format I think incentivizes these pop-off combos. But relying on this Tailwind by pairing it with this sort of cheesy Scarf set meant that if that didn't work, you lost the game. Trying to rely on this Trick Room or this thing that meant that you lost the game. Trying to rely on the Scarf Charizard or trying to rely on the dual Lychee Berry, though this one is particularly challenging. Or trying to do the just these teams did not mesh sufficiently well together for it to actually be a cohesive game plan, and without that cohesive overall game plan, it means that if your opponent has offense, you don't make it through it. So yeah, that's sort of the mentality that I tried to bring, right? We saw this game, you had the Swamp mode or just the Shell Smash Tailwind, and both of those modes were absolutely backbreaking for the Taurus, right? So if they killed the Decidueye, obviously that would have been good. That could have been a potential out in that game, but no idea what the Decidueye was going to do. No idea which of these Pokemon is Sash. Tailwind potentially game losing depending on how speed invested the rest of these Pokemon are. Obviously we know now that they weren't, but they didn't know at this point. So it just meant that by being able to get speed control in this game, they were able to win. By being able to prevent your opponent getting speed control, you just naturally had speed control, and thus was able to win in the follow-up games. And then in this situation, again, by being able to prevent that speed control, by being able to pressure through the heat wave, because it's not like Scarfs are like tech speed control more than like real speed control. So being able to break through that meant that this team didn't have that backbone, and then not really having the ability to set Trick Room because they were on that back foot, but probably were not going to be necessarily able to set it. Well, so probably saying too many words. It would have been difficult for them to set Tailwind, to set Trick Room even at lead, and then be able to excise it on there. Because again, if that Weavile Slowking is there, they're still moving before Porygon, and I don't think that Lurantis is OHKOing the Slowking, unfortunately, for that team. Yeah, so thank you guys all for watching. I did ramble on probably way longer than I meant to, that I think all of these games did, but I just wanted to try and get through the appropriate analysis and explain why I actually think that these games showed relatively similar reasons for why the opponent's game plans failed. And the reason that our teams are all built in the same sort of mid-rangey offense way is because of the fact that we weren't necessarily able to get the best synergies because we had that challenge to draft all the Pokemon at that same price. So yeah, thank you guys all for watching. Goodbye.